Hello everyone. Afternoon. We're just about to start the fifth panel of the day, and glad to see that many of you have returned. We were worried there for a moment. My name is Tom McDonnell, and I'm a senior associate in Brown Rudnick's commercial litigation team. And I'm delighted to be joined today by our panel, lawyers from Spain, Germany, and the Netherlands, and funders from London and Paris. And they're here today to speak about collective redress in Europe with a touch of ESG thrown in as well. So they'll share their views on their own jurisdictions and markets, and also on two particular hot topics. The first, ESG, and the second, the implementation of the EU Representative Action Directive, which is due to come into force in June 2023, and which is intended to give consumers in Europe greater access to justice by creating a framework for consumers to bring claims via nominated or designated entities. So I think I'll just start by letting the panel introduce themselves. So, Tobias.
Yes, thanks, Tom. Hi, my name is Tobias Glienke. I'm a partner at Greenfort. That's a Frankfurt-based law firm, and my practice focuses on dispute resolution, litigation, arbitration, also mediation. And I'm very delighted to be here today to hopefully explain to you that you have to look for Germany when it comes to class actions in the future.
Thanks. My name is Frank Peters. I'm a lawyer with Bureau Brandeis in Amsterdam. We're a litigation-only firm, and we specialize in complex disputes, a lot of collective actions. Obviously, in the Netherlands, there's a system which is geared to doing those cases, so we do a lot of collective actions, but also ordinary corporate and commercial litigation, and quite a bit of ESG litigation, whether it relates to greenwashing or other types of cases, in particular with a focus on the E, I guess, of the ESG. So a lot of environmental stuff.
My name's Emily Woolcott. I'm an investment officer at Woodsford, and prior to joining Woodsford, I was a litigation lawyer in Australia.
My name is Carlos Jara. I'm a partner at Cuatrecasas in the restructuring and special situations team, and I lead the litigation finance practice at Cuatrecasas, and I'm very thankful for being here to the Rudnick team.
Hi, good afternoon. So my name is Paul de Servigny. I'm a fund manager at IVO Capital Partners, a French asset manager that has a litigation finance fund that we're currently fundraising for and deploying across Europe, including France, where collective redress is not quite there yet.
Great, thank you very much. Well, this morning we heard some really positive views, I think, of the landscape in the English and Wales courts. And in the CAP, and a few of the themes that I picked out from the discussion this morning were sort of developments in the right direction around sort of CPR Rule 19.6 and GLOs, and movements in the right direction, even if that development is at times slow and fairly laborious and piecemeal, but also the theme of creating access to justice for larger groups of claimants. And I thought it'd be useful to start just by getting a sort of comparative view with the three from the three lawyers here on the panel. And I wondered if you could each just give an overview of the collective action landscape in your own jurisdiction. So starting with you, maybe Frank.
Thanks, Tom. Yes. Well, in the Netherlands, we've been working and litigating collective redress cases for quite some time now. Of course, it's the third year that our new laws are in place, where it's become possible to file damages cases on an opt-out basis. We used to be able to do collective cases for a long time already, but not claim the actual damages. It sort of stopped short at the declaration of law. I think since the starting of that market in 2020, we saw a big rush of, in particular, GDPR, so privacy-related cases coming to the Netherlands. It more or less coincided the change in the law in the Netherlands and the introduction of GDPR just before that. So that caused a rush of cases. Some have been successful, a lot of them are stuck in the early stage, but I think that led to a sort of cooling for a moment of those cases until probably this week when there was a big win in the Facebook-related litigation, so that may speed things up again. So we have a lot of those sort of opt-out damages cases. We see a lot of opt-in cases, particularly in competition law claims, so follow-on litigation, and other group actions. It's quite a dynamic market where we see defense largely focusing on how to deal with funding and funding arrangements. I think that's the battleground of their choice. So it's going to be interesting developments, I think.
Very good. And Carlos in Spain?
Thanks, Tom. So to date, opt-in has been predominant in the system. Good news for those of you who have invested in opt-in cases is that those will remain in place despite the implementation of the new directive, because it's possible to keep ongoing opt-in actions, and it will be possible to have opt-in after the implementation of the directive. With the opt-out, there will be a new interesting tool in the market, not least from a structuring standpoint, because creditworthiness will no longer be an issue, and possibly transaction costs will also be reduced significantly, because in this case investors will be able to deal directly with that representative entity. And basically the certification hearing will be based on three main topics. First of all, that the interests are homogeneous, that the claim is not blatantly unfounded, and the third point would be that if there is funding, that needs to be disclosed, also the identity of the investor, and the court will review that there is no conflict of interest between the funder and the collective interests. I would say that maybe the directive has fallen short, because collective actions, this opt-out system, will be restrained to consumer actions, and that of course doesn't include, for example, tax refund claims against the tax authorities, other claims that can be scalable against the administration, or finally shareholder litigation, which we will be talking further later on in the context of ESG.
Tobias?
Yes, the German class action landscape is not as exciting, because historically the German legal system, civil legal system, doesn't know or didn't know class actions. That changed a bit in the last years. That first started with regard to shareholder compensation after corporate structural measures, such as a squeeze out, for example, where courts were enabled to set a compensation with binding effect for all shareholders. Then after the financial crisis in 2010 and the diesel scandal, the German legislator introduced the so-called model declaratory action, but as the name indicates, that's not a real class action. The courts can pick one model case out of similar cases and decide the facts of the case with binding effect for other similar cases, but it cannot award any damages. So in the end, every single consumer has to bring its own claim for damages against, let's say, Daimler or BMW or whoever. In the future, we will probably get a class action when we have to implement the CRD, but I think we will going to be talking about it a little bit later.
Thank you. I mean, your declaratory action sounds quite similar to the 19.6 process here. Does does the fact that claimants have to go through the process individually of proving loss put people off or dissuade people from bringing claims under that system?
Well, that's a good question. I would say probably yes, or put the other way around. I think that more people would be encouraged to pursue their claims if they had an easy system where they could just opt in and then wait for the outcome with less risk.
Sure. Well, that's an overview of the three jurisdictions represented here from the panel. From your perspective, Emily and then Paul, is there a jurisdiction as funders and investors that you find particularly friendly?
Thanks, Tom. So I think I'd have to go with Tim Frank here, and I found the Netherlands to be particularly funder friendly. Now, Woodsford has a diverse portfolio of cases across the UK, Australia, and then other select jurisdictions. And the portfolio of cases I look after has a specific focus on our Dutch actions. So unlike many of our excellent speakers here today, I can't say that I have 20 years of experience, but luckily, I can say that Woodsford over the last 12 years has analysed jurisdictions in the litigation finance space around the globe, and we publish up-to-date guides which explore the litigation landscapes across the borders, and we seek contributions from our leading lawyers across the borders to help us realise which jurisdictions we can get comfortable investing in. And it's against this backdrop that we first got comfortable with investing in the Netherlands. So why do I think it's funder friendly? Well, in the Netherlands, we are pursuing compensation and accountability in two key ways. First, we have organised and funded international and institutional stakeholders into a special purpose vehicle, or an SPV, on an opt-in basis. And second, we have funded and supported the constitution of a Dutch foundation, which represents other investors, such as retail investors, on an opt-out basis. Now, the ability for businesses like ours to be able to use an SPV to collate stakeholders into one vehicle puts us in a unique position. Obviously, this kind of collective action is expensive and it creates a genuine need for funding. But stakeholders also need assistance to be collated into these vehicles, and stakeholders often know that the actions of corporates is wrong, but what they can't do or cannot afford to do is take on the big corporate giants alone. The second limb is how our business has evolved from being a purely litigation finance business to a business that strives to bring stakeholders together to pursue escalated and, if necessary, collective litigation. But despite our positive experience in the Netherlands, we have been faced with some challenges, and this can be cases progress slowly through the courts, and in light of the new WAMCA regime, we've also seen some uncertainty in procedural steps. But I believe that if we continue to work with our leading litigation lawyers in the Netherlands and continue to apply innovative approaches, that the Netherlands can continue to be a funder-friendly jurisdiction.
So for us, obviously, looking for collective actions in France as a funder is pretty much impossible to date. So we've had to look around. Historically, we started with the common law world, and now we've moved much more similar to Woodsford, focusing on first the Netherlands, which has become the place to be as a funder if you're looking for collective redress actions, especially because of the legislative context and the ability to do opt-in as well as opt-out in a variety of different ways. Then other jurisdictions that we've looked at and that we like include Spain, where we think that they're not quite as advanced as the Netherlands, but definitely extremely attractive in terms of the ability to take these actions through. We benefit as well as I would say a smaller funder than maybe some of the other big names around here. The fact that legal budgets in Europe, including the Netherlands, Spain, are much more reasonable, which allows for a smaller ticket size, more diversification amongst the portfolio, and also actions which you can replicate, because there are, for instance, on the consumer side or on the antitrust side, actions that are available in the Netherlands and that can then be replicated in Spain and then serve maybe as a basis to do it on a more single plaintiff basis out of France, which is probably how we get back to France because, you know, French people love to go to France. But we have to stick with, unfortunately, for now, the Netherlands and Spain as our top picks.
Thanks very much, Frank. You're doing well on this panel. So that's the sort of general broad overview that we wanted to cover, and then there were two topics that we just wanted to go into in a bit more detail whilst time allows. Taking first the Redress directive, Carlos, can you just give us a brief overview of what it is, when it's due to be implemented and how, and some of the opportunities that it will create?
Yeah, thanks, Sam, absolutely. So it should be implemented by June. I'm not sure whether we're going to make it, but it will be there sooner or later, and that will definitely be a tool that will galvanize the market. I do believe, though, that there will be investment opportunities in both sides. Right now, there is a huge delta in the market, particularly in cartel cases and follow-on claims. So there's a big delta between what is being petitioned, the headline amount, and what's being adjudicated by the courts. So defendant side funding can also be attractive in this market because there can be savings when one looks. So yes, a case can be lost, but to what extent? So that's one thing that can be interesting from the corporate side. And also, there are some cartels in which corporates can also be claimants, of course, and in Spain we don't have champerty issues, so monetization, synthetic monetization is of course possible, but it's also possible to arrange true sales. And being that synthetic or not, today we discussed about cash. Of course, liquidity is king, but there's another element which in my experience has been paramount when it comes to litigation finance in Spain, which is profitability. So through monetization, through true sales, it's possible to flow the deal through P&L, and that's a huge incentive for corporates in Spain to also be interested in litigation finance. Again, I devote half of my time to litigation finance, and I only expect that to be more or less the same in the next few years.
Thank you. And would it be right to say, Tobias, that the Redress directive will have a larger impact in some jurisdictions than others? So take Germany, for example, where you've explained sort of fairly limited collective action landscape. What do you think the opportunities, or how do you think the opportunities for pursuing collective claims will change, if they will indeed change?
Yes, I think they will change, definitely. And I also think that the new class action that will be created will be used quite often, at least more than the model declaratory action, where the legislator envisaged 450 cases per year when it was implemented in 2018, and in the last 5 years we have only counted 34 cases overall. So that was not really successful. Yeah, as I said, and same as in Spain, Germany has not yet implemented the CRD, but there is a draft. There is a draft law, and we'll see if we can make to pass that by the summer. But judging on the basis of that draft, I think it could be a real game changer in Germany, mainly for two reasons. Obviously, Germany is a country with a lot of companies and also a lot of consumers. So there is quite a need for effective consumer protection and also for effective means to pursue consumer claims. And until today, there is no real possibility for the consumers, if they don't want to individually file their claims and bring their claims. That is the one thing. And the other thing is that the German draft, the German class action, as it looks now, will go way beyond what the CRD requires. First of all, it will not only allow consumers to be part of the class, but also small companies, meaning companies with less than 50 employees and less than 10 million annual turnover. And it will not only apply to specific consumer rights as the directive requires, but it will apply to all civil claims. So also to cartel damage claims, for example. And the good news for most of you in here, it allows funding, at least if the funder is not dependent on the company that is to be sued, and if the funder does not interfere with consumer rights. But even if there is no funding, then the consumers that participate in the class action have no real cost risk, because the costs will only, in case the case is lost, will only be borne by the association that brings the case and formally acts as claimant. So I think there are a lot of opportunities. We will have a real class action, but there are also downsides. For example, as it looks right now, Germany will use an opt-in model, which requires a relatively early opt-in. You have to opt in before the first oral hearing, and a lot of consumers might miss out on the class action. Usually, press coverage is most press coverage is at or after the oral hearing. Of course, when a judgment is rendered as well, but there's a big chance that consumers will only realize that there is a class action when it's too late, and then they only have one chance to prevent their claims from being time barred, and that's again their individual claim. So in my view, it will be really dependent on the question whether the associations bringing the claim or the funders will manage to collect enough consumers, collect enough claims to make the class action really attractive. But overall, I think it will have a big impact, and it will create a lot of opportunities.
And can I, Tom?
Yes, please do.
Can I ask Tobias and Carlos, but because in the Netherlands we saw when the floodgates were opened in 2020, that the courts were all very excited over the opportunities, and they said, okay, let's do this. And then some, particularly the Amsterdam court, I think it started experimenting with how to apply all this new law, and within several months, I think we had severe backlogs where everybody was thinking how to deal with this, with the size of these cases, and the complexities and all the novelties. Do you think your court systems are ready to handle this after June 2023? And do you think they're wise enough to sort of get in touch with the Dutch judges to know, sort of to get a sense for what's coming to them?
I think it would be great for the Spanish judges to discuss with your colleagues, first of all. So the good news is that there will be specialized courts that will be created to handle these claims so that the system is not collapsed. That's what the proposed draft is now contemplating. But I do agree that this is a game changer. And honestly, to me, it was surprising that you just need to demonstrate that the claim is not blatantly unfounded. So you need to survive a big motion to dismiss on day one, which in a cartel case, in a follow-on claim, shouldn't be that difficult. And second, the interests need to be homogeneous. And that's all. So if you get to incorporate one of the entities, that's it. You don't need to do any more build-up. And yes, if there is any ongoing opt-in group action, well, too bad, you missed those guys. But you can still get all the market. And with the new ESG directive, that's going to be a huge opportunity for law firms, for funders, because if they do the right connections with the law firms, and law firms are connected to one of those entities, I think that's going to be a great hit in the market.
And Tobias, you mentioned one of the hurdles of claims not getting to, or knowledge of claims not reaching consumers quickly enough in time for the first hearing. I know that there are people in this room who will have experience of using search engine optimization and various marketing techniques to get knowledge of claims out to claimants. So please speak to Tobias after this. Frank, we're going to move to you next. And how do you think this will work, the Redress Directive will work in the Netherlands, where you already have a really well developed collective claim structure?
I think the expectation in the Netherlands is that the impact is going to be limited, at least in a sense that our laws are compliant with the directive already, so we don't need to make any changes. The impact, of course, can be that the Dutch glamour may fade a little, of course. If Tobias and Carlos move into this market, then suddenly I have to find a new job. So I think that is probably the biggest change for the Netherlands. I think that they'll lose the more or less exclusivity in this area. I think for the rest, I think the directive, it's good that it's there. It's good that this strange position of the Netherlands to allow these cases to be bought, that is sort of made normal throughout the European Union. I think that's the right way to go. I think the developments in the Netherlands are probably going to be, apart from the consumer cases, going to be in other areas. I think we've done a lot of work on the GDPR. I think we'll continue to see that. And ESG cases, I think, will, given the experience that we have and that we are used to dealing with this type of cases, I think we can try and move into that space, see if you can do ESG cases on a commercially viable basis as well. So not just for NGOs, but to actually combine the two, so both do the right thing and make it financially interesting for everybody involved. I think that's probably what a new development is for us.
And I mean, we hear a lot in the UK about how well developed the Netherlands system is. I mean, if you were to pick 2 or 3 features that you say are the sort of really good features of the system, what would you say those are?
I think one of the best features is that you have the choice to go for opt-out or opt-in, because I think the opt-out system is it has its problems. It's quite unpredictable in some respects. There's the biggest hurdle of just being found admissible. There's the representativeness test, which has turned out to be a bit of a trauma for myself. Actually, one of the cases that we started and lost in first instance on that point. It's unpredictable how courts will deal with that, so that's a bad thing. Another insecurity, I think, is how the actual damages are going to be distributed and how that process is going to play out. But the good thing is that we have the opt-out system. We have some examples. We know at least where the black zones are, so where not to go. It's probably clear where the white zones are as well, so we know how to avoid the gray areas. I think we have that established. So yeah.
Thanks very much. And what impact, Emily and Paul, do you think the Redress Directive will have on funding across Europe? Maybe Paul first.
Well, hopefully more opportunities to fund either similar cases that we already liked and already did in the Netherlands or in Spain, and to have other jurisdictions that open up and become attractive and interested in funding. It'll allow funding to become more popular and more common across Europe, which is only a good thing in my view. That'll be the first one. Then we'll see how France gets maybe told on because of their project for applying the Collective Redress Directive, which is extremely limited to date, and maybe that'll force them to go back to the drawing sheet and start over. But for now, it's hopefully more and more cases. Spain being already a jurisdiction we're looking at, have maybe more opt-out there, not just the Netherlands, as Frank mentioned. It'll be tough on you guys, but you'll have to share. And then be able to fund more of these claims across Europe for us.
And Emily?
Honestly, Tom, I think it's perhaps too early to tell what the impact will be. If you took Australia is an example. In 2006, litigation funding was prohibited, and now Australia is home to one of the most sophisticated markets. The directive aims for harmonisation, but not necessarily uniformed mechanisms, and it also provides for a minimum standards to be adopted by EU member states. But I think the opportunity for litigation funding could be even greater if member states choose to implement mechanisms that don't only protect consumers, but also protect businesses. I think Woodsford, and I expect other businesses like ours, won't wait for the full implementation of the directive before they consider investing. It's clear a lot of the jurisdictions have failed to meet the deadlines that have been set by the directive already to transpose the mechanisms into their national law. But overall, I think it's a positive and exciting step for Europe, and I think if the funding community can apply creativity and adaptability to the different models that are introduced, it could be really a great step.
And you mentioned Woodsford's ESG credentials. I mean, is there a crossover with the directive to ESG, or otherwise are you seeing an increase in ESG type cases in Europe or further afield?
Yeah, Tom. So I think someone in the audience said to me earlier that they think they have a narrower view on the definition of ESG, so perhaps it's helpful to describe the perspective I'm coming from. That ESG is the wide-ranging environmental, social and governance standards that companies increasingly say they comply with and or are obligated to comply with. And companies make promises to their stakeholders, to their investors, regulators, customers, and the wider community. And when a company fails to uphold these ESG standards and causes catastrophic loss and damage, these wronged stakeholders, those stakeholders who have made investments based on promises that are untrue, or customers who have been ripped off, have the ability and the possibility to engage in collective action. Now, the CRD specifically states that its aims are to, one, strengthen consumer confidence in the internal market by making representative action effective. And second, it states that its aim is to regulate the use of collective action to avoid an abusive process. And by doing this, they aim to deliver access to justice. So, as we've seen across the borders, there's often a gulf between good motivations and genuine reasons to engage in collective action, and then the ability to do that. And that's where businesses like ours will remain at the vanguard of ESG litigation. These consumers will need assistance to be able to get access to justice, and often they will need funding assistance. We've taken steps in Europe to date to help bring stakeholders together to seek redress from severe loss and damage that they've suffered. And we've seen ESG failures. And these ESG failures, some examples have been Airbus's failure to disclose their admitted wrongdoing of corruption and bribery on a global scale, the failure of major banks to comply with anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing rules, product manufacturers' failings to disclose severe quality product issues. So I think while corporate wrongdoing continues to occur, and European stakeholders, if they can get assistance to be coordinated into these necessary vehicles, or assistance in understanding their opt-out regimes, and they're supported by directives like the CRD, but corporates continue to fail to change their behaviour, I think we'll only see an increase in ESG litigation across Europe.
Okay, and Frank, Tobias and Carlos, I'd just like to open up to you. I mean, does that accord with your view of ESG litigation in your respective jurisdictions? Maybe with Carlos to start.
Well, so the Representative Action Directive refers to consumers, and I think that ESG is definitely broader than that. So that means that there will be opt-in in a lot of the cases. Of course, and in some cases, there will be ESG statutes or there will be consumer statutes which will basically give standing to the people that have suffered the damage. In other cases, it will be a clear wrongdoing by the corporation, but in other cases, a key issue in this litigation will be whether investors have suffered a direct or indirect damage, because that would determine whether the primary damages action belongs to the corporation. It is a derivative action or it is pure shareholder litigation. And I think that the devil is in the details, but in the US, for example, I mean, a lot of these actions have failed to go because, well, it wasn't shareholder litigation, it was a derivative lawsuit. So I think there will be for sure a lot of litigation, but it will be paramount to figure out what are the key, the good strategies to bring this forward.
Thank you. And Frank, your views on ESG litigation in the Netherlands?
Well, I think there's quite some big cases coming. We've seen a few big ones, of course, in relation to Shell, which is not what actually was a collective redress case, although damages weren't claimed. And I take Emily's point that you can take the broader interpretation of ESG as well, where general governance failings and fraud are, and that perfectly, indeed, they fall within the ESG failings. But I think in a more narrow approach, where you look at the environmental aspect, for instance, I think there's clearly opportunities being looked for and being developed in terms of basically polluter pays cases where damages claims can be filed, for instance, in relation to sea level rises, etc. There are lots of complexities in there, but I know that many people are sort of looking into how to deal with those. Greenwashing cases, which are now being brought, we're doing one against KLM at the moment about the sustainability claims for an NGO, but those can be brought by consumers as well. I mean, if you feel persuaded by those claims, buying your ticket, and it turns out that actually it isn't as sustainable as you thought, there may be a financial aspect to that as well. And I think that's an area which there's a huge potential, which is largely undiscovered at the moment. It's in the domain of the NGOs. But I think also with the collective redress directive coming, that'll probably move into the fundable area. Yeah.
And Tobias in Germany?
Yes, I think it's important to distinguish between the three letters of ESG. When you look at the G, the cases that Emily just described, we see a lot of them. A couple of years ago, you would have called them compliance cases. And there will always be these type of cases, I think. With regard to the E, the environmental claims, everyone is talking about it, but in practice, I don't see too many of them. I think in Germany we had 5 cases so far. 3 of them have already been turned down. I think 2 are still pending, but the chances are, in my view, not that good. So the chances that something like Shell happens in Germany are not that high. Of course, there will be further cases probably, but I assume that Germany will not be the preferred jurisdiction to bring these cases. And with regard to the social claims or related to social, we have a new law in Germany that just entered into force that requires all the big companies to adhere to certain standards in the whole production chain, and you can hold them accountable if they violate these standards. So I assume that there are many cases coming in the next years in that area.
Thank you. Well, at that stage, we've just got a couple of minutes left, so just open it out to the floor if there are any questions. There's just one there, gentleman there, I think. Microphone's on its way.
So thank you. So I have a question about the Dutch system, the WAMCA, in particular in the cross-border situations. So imagine you have German consumers, French consumers who are taking a plane to fly to Schiphol. What are their options for joining an opt-out case in the Netherlands? And is that not something that should be explored more systematically?
I assume that's a question to me. Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Well, there are possibilities in the opt-out area, so in the WAMCA regime, like you say, but not many funders are happy to take the risk of looking into those. Basically, the system says that having a Dutch defendant, that in itself is not enough to bring an opt-out case. There have to be more indications that the case is suitable for the Dutch jurisdiction, which we call the scope rule. You can bring the case, and if the case sticks for instance, because there are sufficient Dutch claimants involved, you can ask the court to open it up to foreign claimants as well, so that it can be opened on an opt-in basis for non-Dutch participants. I know of some of these cases which are pending, which have this request in the writ, so it says at some point, the court will be asked to open up the case for not Dutch residents to participate in the case on an opt-in basis. But as far as I know, none of the cases have come so far that we've reached that point. And I know that in my practice, I've not seen any funders being happy to take on the risk of bringing a case on an opt-out basis for non-Dutch residents. You can make the case that it should be possible, but it's risky and experimental, and so far I'm not aware of any cases having been brought on that basis.
Thank you. Great question. Thanks very much. Well, that's us out of time. I'd just like to say thank you very much to the panel. Thank you very much.